Anytime I facilitate a meeting, the most important thing that people want to know is where are the bathrooms? You got it. You win. So, restrooms are out in the entryway to the right. So everybody knows now where the restrooms are. So if you get up and leave, we know where you're going, right? Ha. The second thing, this is not part of our script tonight, but on request, considering that this is November 7th, that day, I'm sorry, I'm wishing it was November. December 7th, the day that lives in infamy. Sid Grinnell is going to come up and give a short memorial for Pearl Harbor. If everybody would please stand in respect.
Thank you. We lost 2,400 military personnel on this day in 1941 in Pearl Harbor. I'd like everybody to bow their heads and give a moment of silence for the people that died at Pearl Harbor. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you to all our veterans. If we have in the room here, thank you for your service, past, present, and future. Again, my name is Marcia Little. I'm a resident of the city of Owasso, and I was asked to facilitate this meeting because I have no affiliation with any position on the wind farm issue. I do have some introductory notes, and I'm going to be reading from these notes. And I mention this because some of you can probably relate to this. I've reached that age when I can remember things that happened 20 years ago, but I can't remember what I wanted to say 2 minutes ago. So, first, Diane Rogers, are you in the room? Invisible somewhere? She must be out back. Diane Rogers owns this phenomenal DeMar Conference Center facility. And I'd like to thank Diane for providing this space for the meeting this evening. DeMar Conference Center is a dream she built into life with years and years of hard work and powerful determination. So I'd like to give her a round of applause. Our meeting this evening is hosted by the Shiawassee Regional Chamber of Commerce and the Shiawassee Economic Development Partnership. Both organizations are hosting this meeting solely because it aligns with their missions. The Shiawassee Regional Chamber of Commerce advances the economic success of our region by aligning information and resources and investing in people who create the future. The mission of the Shiawassee Economic Development Partnership is to improve Shiawassee County's economy through business attraction, retention, and expansion. I was asked to facilitate this meeting to keep it organized, on track, and within our 2-hour time limit. To do that, this meeting is going to be conducted according to the following ground rules. Number 1, the purpose of this meeting is to share information among people who have different ideas, perceptions, or opinions. This is neither a rally nor a demonstration for or against one position over another. We are not here to persuade, debate, disagree, argue, or attack each other in any fashion. We are here to listen and to learn. Any printed information by the presenters, offered by the presenters, will be available on, I don't see any side tables, but we'll find a place. Back corner, okay, back corner, for anybody that would like to pick it up on their way out after the meeting. Number 2, it's obvious, but I have to say it. Everyone here is expected to be courteous, to listen silently, remain seated, and be respectful of others. That includes refraining from nonverbal responses, outbursts, any form of intimidation, or unruly behavior. Number 3, the meeting agenda, which I'll read in a moment, will be tightly managed, consisting of timed presentations followed by a question-answer period. I will signal each presenter at the 5-minute mark for the longer presentations, and then again at the 1-minute mark. Out of respect for all in attendance, presenters will be expected to end at the end of their time limit. Number 4, the presenters agreed in advance that any statement, data, or claims they make, which they assert are facts, not just opinions, will be verified by referencing the name and credentials of the qualified source. Number 5, for the sake of time and order, questions will be accepted only in writing on the cards provided at each chair. Since many answers are likely to evolve from the presentations, I recommend listening to all the presentations before writing a question. When you have a written question, please raise your hand and your card will be collected. The collected cards will be reviewed to eliminate duplicates and to screen out any inflammatory or inappropriate comments. The question cards will be presented to me at the conclusion of the formal presentations. I will read them aloud and they will be answered by the presenter that was identified for the question. In the interest of keeping to our timeline and to be fair to all, question cards are going to be selected at random from a pile that they're going to bring up here and give me. Answers to those questions will be timed and limited to a maximum 2 minutes. Obviously, as we may not be able to read and answer all the questions before this meeting is adjourned, and I know that several individuals have come up and spoken to the hosts about providing letters or information or a series of questions, all of those kinds of things will be gathered. We must adjourn promptly at 9 o'clock, but the hosts are going to be arranging for a web page where all of the information from tonight's presentations, all of the questions and all of the answers, and all of those additional letters or papers that were provided or are going to be provided will be uploaded, and you'll be able to see them all online. We're sorry we can't get to all the questions, but we have a limited timeline tonight, and there's already a stack of cards over there with questions, so I know we're not going to get to a very large percentage. So, let's begin. I'm going to introduce our agenda and our presenters. I'll go through them all and then I'll call them up. Brad Leela from Apex Energy is going to outline the proposed wind farm project. He has 30 minutes. Kevon Martis, a representative for a concerned citizens group, will make a presentation as well, also 30 minutes. Following those two presentations, first Brad, then Kevon, will each have 5 minutes to make any additional comments on issues they feel need clarification. Our final presentation will be a very short overview of the county's consideration and approval process given by Pete Preston. He says it'll only be a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes at the most. So, subsequent to all of that, we will do the question and answer period, and at 9 o'clock sharp, we will wrap up and be adjourned. Timekeeper, are you ready? He's got to bring the presentations up. Brad, if you'd like to come up and get positioned.
Thank you.
When you're ready, he's
Okay.
ready, he'll let you know.
Can I use the clicker? My name is Brad Lelo. I am the Director of Project Development from Apex Clean Energy. With me tonight is Scott Hawken, also a Director of Project Development, and Scott Cozier, Regional Director from Apex. Thank you all very much for coming. We've been looking forward to this evening for quite some time. I would like to thank you. I would like to very much thank the members of Rush, Fairfield, Middlebury, and Owasso Township, the board members, as well as the Shiawassee County Board of Commissioners and the Shiawassee County Planning Commission. We really appreciate your time, and we appreciate all your time coming out here tonight. So tonight we're going to discuss the project, we're going to discuss some updates, we're going to discuss some benefits, and then we're going to discuss wind energy in general. Okay. To date, the people who oppose this project have gone around, have met with the townships, have given presentations. Okay. We are here to give you the other side of the story. Essentially, you've heard half of the story so far, and we are here to present facts to you. Okay, we are not here to give you just our opinion. When we present these issues to you, I went out of my way to highlight all of my citations in red and embolden them. My hope is that when you leave here tonight, you will take a look at our presentation, you will go online, and you will do your own homework, and you will take a look at what we are citing here. Again, this isn't just our opinion. I fully expect as if I were sitting there next to you, and I would think, well, of course he's going to say that he's from the Wind Development Company. Of course he's going to have that opinion. Okay, that's irregardless. Take a look at the facts. Take a look at the citations. Okay, there are over 300,000 wind turbines in the world. There are 48,000 wind turbines in the United States. All right. This is not new technology. All right, what you're going to hear tonight, you know, is probably new to you, but in reality, this has been hashed over for years and years, and yet still we keep building wind projects. The price of wind energy keeps coming down, and it's just a fantastic resource. So, again, just please pay attention to the sources, and we'll just move on to the presentation here. So, okay, this is just a terrible map. I apologize, but really is. The reason that we don't have a project design up here is because we don't have a project design. We do not have an array. We do not know exactly where the turbines are going. There has been some a map that has been sent out by some folks who oppose this project. That is not an accurate map, okay? And I promise you that when we put a site plan in front of the county and the townships here, that it will not look like that map, so please disregard that. Right now we have roughly over 16,000 acres leased in this project with over 140 families that are signed into lease agreements. That's over 300 plus individuals. All right, currently we're in mid-stage development. We anticipate the start of construction on this project will be the fall of 2018 or the spring of 2019 with anticipated completion of this project by late fall, early winter 2019. Okay, this is an economic opportunity, okay? We all have gone through this last year and we have heard politicians promise us everything that they're going to deliver to us. And the number one thing that they promise us economic opportunity, and that's exactly what we're offering here today. Okay, I'm going to mention some numbers here, and I'm going to hash these numbers through and through this presentation here. Let me see this pointer work here. Okay, so nearly $12 million in tax revenue generated. Okay, that is what this project is going to generate for this community. All right, and that's on the low end, by the way. That's based on a 20-year PPA. The number is probably anywhere from $12 to $15 million. That is money that is going to stay here locally. Okay, $12 to $15 million. Over $26 million is going to be paid to landowners in this project. Again, that's roughly around 140 families. Over 300 individuals are going to receive roughly $26 million in the life of this project. This last bullet point here, I think is very important because I don't think very few people in this room are aware of this. But over $20 billion of your money is leaving Michigan every single year to pay for your energy. $20 billion is being sent to West Virginia, to Kentucky, to Montana, all right, to pay for coal and to pay for natural gas. You have an opportunity here to generate energy in your backyard, to keep the revenues here, to keep that $12 to $15 million in tax revenue here, to keep the $26 million here, rather than sending that part of the $20 billion outside of your state. You folks are from Michigan. You guys do something better than anybody else in the United States, and it's manufactured. You guys have the ability to manufacture this energy in your backyard and keep that money here. Okay? By the way, my source here, Dickinson Wright Law Firm, is the firm that came up with the $12 million. The source of the $20 billion, that is the Michigan Public Service Commission. All right, wind projects increase tax base. All right, of Michigan's 83 counties, Gratiot, Huron, and Tuscola counties, those with the most wind turbines by far, all right, they experienced the largest base increase from 2011 to 2015, which was when most of the wind turbines were built. Let's take a look at this. Gratiot County's tax base increased 38.48%. Huron County, 34.22%. Tuscola 26.02. Your state average in Michigan, all right, in the same time frame is 1.28%. The tax base on average is 1.28%. Those three counties that have almost all the turbines in Michigan, look at that increase, 38, 34, and 26%. That's pretty substantial. All right, here in county, how is the money used? County operating expenses, schools, roads, libraries, seniors, veterans, all right, the sheriff's department, police force. Tuscola County really isn't much different. County operating expenses, bridge, street repair, emergency services. Look at the impact for the schools. The intermediate schools have done incredibly well in these counties, not to mention Akron, Fairgrove, and Reese schools. All right. School debt, fire ambulance, township operating expenses. I apologize, I'm talking fast. I got 30 minutes. I'm trying to get this in. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about myth busting. The only reason we got to bring this up is because there's been a lot of stuff that's been disseminated amongst you people that is just, some of it is just flat out not true, some of it is misinformation, and some of it is kind of fun with numbers. So let's jump into this. All right, this is, what is trespass zoning? Many of you have heard this term. This is a term that's been coined by those that oppose wind energy. And essentially, it is a term created by wind energy opponents to promote the claim that a private property owner does not have the right to use his or her land as they see fit because it may impact a neighbor. Everybody in this room right now has to set aside your opinion of wind energy, okay? Because what is being asked here has implications for everybody far beyond wind energy, this wind energy project, okay? Essentially what is being asked here is excessive, extensive government regulation in reach into your private property rights, okay? And I'm gonna do a real poor job of explaining this, but I'm gonna try. What you will hear, and you're probably gonna hear this after I'm done and Mr. Martis speaks, is he talks about trespass zoning, and basically what he states is, if you have a wind turbine, because of a potential for fire, which by the way is extremely rare with wind turbines, but because of a potential for fire, you should stay back 1,640 feet from a neighbor's property line, okay? And he says because of that setback, which by the way is from a wind turbine manual, in the event of a fire, they say stay back that far. So he is stating that if that wind turbine is any closer than 1,640 feet, that you are somehow diminishing the property value of your neighbor, okay? And that's the term trespass zoning. Because he's saying in the event of that fire, it could extend over, all right? That is a reach, and they are asking your government, your board officials, to extend their regulation and to essentially state that, well, you better keep that turbine much further back because it's going to impact your neighbor to take those rights away. All right, where this can come into play here, all right? Acting on this concept sets a dangerous precedence for private property rights across the board, okay? What if a neighbor decides that they're tired of smelling cow manure, all right, from stockyards or even from spreading in the fields? Trespass zoning, by their definition, is the smell of that manure is going to cross the property line. Therefore, those neighbors should have the right to say, you know what, I'm tired of smelling manure. You better set that farm back a good half mile, maybe a mile, because of the smell of manure. Okay? What if the sound of a tractor, combine, a cement truck, or a gravel truck, exceeds a certain decibel level? Or what about the dust? I mean, if I owned a cement company, if I owned an excavation firm, this would scare the heck out of me. Because essentially they're stating that, well, you know what, if you kick up some dust, that's going to extend past the property line, and therefore, you're infringing on my rights, so you better back up, okay? I think this is very interesting coming from this group, okay? Because, they're indicating that because of a fire, all right, which again is so not likely, that you better set a certain distance back, all right? While Mr. Martis travels around the United States and opposes wind project, he also lobbies for the oil and gas industry. What do you think the setback would be from a natural gas pipeline in the event of a fire? All right. The answer to that from the Department of Transportation is 1 mile. We are surrounded by natural gas pipelines. Okay. It is more likely that a natural gas pipeline will burst or start on fire than a wind turbine. So does that mean that we should stay back 1 mile from all natural gas pipelines, you couldn't possibly live around here, right? I'm not advocating for that. I think that's absurd, all right? We need energy. We all need energy, all right? But what I'm stating is that it's also absurd to think that you should stay back 1,640 feet in the event of a wind turbine fire. So, the bottom bullet point here, I'll read this for you. The law states that as long as my use of private property does not pose direct health, safety, and welfare of a neighbor, it is my right. You're going to hear those three words time and time again: health, safety, and welfare. Okay, that is why they're stating that a wind turbine could catch on fire, because they need to somehow prove to you that wind turbines are somehow impacting your health, safety, and welfare. Keep in mind, folks, that wind energy is one of the safest, cleanest forms of energy in the world. All right? Natural gas, coal, nuclear is responsible for thousands and millions of deaths around the world. Nobody has ever died from a wind turbine. Now, I'm sure it's occurred during construction and maintenance, but a wind turbine has never fallen over and killed anybody. But yet, you know, these other form of energies that we're relying on right now, that you're sending $20 billion out of your state every single year, those are responsible for constant death. So if you're truly concerned about health, safety, and welfare, should we not look at all these other forms of energy and the implications that it has on us? Okay, health, safety, and welfare again. So do wind turbines pose a risk to health, safety, and welfare? All right, and here's the answer. There is no scientifically supported evidence that wind turbines have adverse impacts on health or welfare. Okay, and you're saying, well, geez, Brad, where's your citation? Here's the citations. Massachusetts Department of Public Health. The weight of evidence suggests no association between noise from wind turbines and measures of psychological distress or mental health problems. The Australian Medical Association. After careful consideration and deliberation, NHMRC concludes that there is currently no consistent evidence that wind farms cause adverse health effects in humans. There is no direct evidence that exposure to wind farm noise affects physical or mental health. There is no direct evidence that consider possible effects on health of infrasound or low-frequency noise from wind farms. Again, citation, Massachusetts Department of Health, Australian Medical Association. How about the Wisconsin Department of Health Services? Based on our ongoing review of scientific literature about wind turbines and health, Wisconsin Department of Health Services continues to conclude that levels of noise, shadow flicker, and infrasound measured from contemporary wind turbines do not reach exposure levels associated with objectively verifiable human health concerns such as decreased sleep quality or elevated blood pressure. Okay? Again, these aren't our terms. This is from Wisconsin Department of Health Services. How about Health Canada? No evidence was found to support a link between exposure to wind turbine noise and any of the self-reported illnesses such as dizziness, tinnitus, migraines, and chronic conditions such as heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes. No association was found between the multiple measures of stress, such as hair cortisol, blood pressure, heart rate, self-reported stress, and exposure to wind turbine noise. One more. American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine. Infrasound and low-frequency sound can be generated by the operation of wind turbines. However, neither low-frequency sound nor infrasound in the context of wind turbines or in experimental studies has been associated with adverse health effects. Okay? The last quote here is from Nicholas School of Environment at Duke University. This is just a numbers thing, which I found staggering. Roughly $330 to $970 billion is spent annually because of the damages from pollution from electricity produced by fossil fuels, and nearly $1 trillion every single year. All right, in other words, peer-reviewed science that proves the burning of fossil fuels causes death. That's the biggest stack I could find for pictures. There's probably enough to fill up this corner of this room, okay? Peer-reviewed science that wind turbines are harmful. All right, that's the picture and that's the truth. And again, please, you don't have to believe us on this. Please do your homework. Okay, let's get into property values. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and by the way, you know, we've been hearing a lot of people that have some concerns that they feel that property values are going to decline because of because of wind energy projects, okay? The evidence does not support that one bit, and here's what we can get into. The Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory analyzed 50,000 home sales in 67 wind facilities across 9 different states, and did not uncover any impacts to nearby home property values. The study was funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. Okay, it was not funded by the wind companies. It wasn't funded by those who oppose wind companies. It was funded by the Department of Energy, who supports renewable energy and supports coal and oil and gas. Here's a quote from there. This is the second of 2 major studies we have conducted on this topic, and in both studies, using different data sets, we find no statistical evidence that operating wind turbines have had any measurable impact on home sales prices. Okay. If 50,000 home sales wasn't enough, the University of Connecticut and the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, they studied the sales of 122,000 homes, and the study found no net effect due to the arrival of turbines. Okay, this is an interesting chart. All right, so this comes from the Michigan thumb area. Okay, you got all these counties down here: Genesee, Macomb, Lapeer, St. Clair, Saginaw, Sand Lake, Tuscola. What you see here in the green, these are wind turbines. These are megawatts of wind turbines. Okay, and as they were installed, the blue line is the property values. Okay, you see Genesee, Macomb, Lapeer, St. Clair, right? Very flat. The property values didn't increase, in this instance, actually decreased. But these 3 counties where all the wind turbines are, look at the property values in that amount of time. All right, this is from Wind on the Wires. They went to the equalization departments in all these counties, and they came up with these figures. All right, property values again. Bloomberg Business Week. Bloomberg, one of the most well-respected business publications that there is out there. And here's what they had to say. The more than $100 billion that companies have invested in wind power in low-income counties, where about 70% of farms are located, has helped double assessed land values in some of the poorest parts of rural America. It's provided a much-needed infusion of local tax revenue that's being used to rebuild schools and pay down debt. That's what you're seeing in Michigan as well. They're using it for schools, they're paying down debt, as well as all the other services. Now, the Wisconsin Supreme Court, all right, this is, you always save the best for last, right? I'm from Wisconsin, so I know a little bit about this court case. So the Wisconsin the Wisconsin Realtors Association, for political reasons, they had demanded that whenever a wind turbine project is sited and permitted, that they must do a housing property value study. The state of Wisconsin said it's really not needed because, in their opinion at that time, they do not impact property values. So what happened? They took it to court, and this went all the way to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Okay, the Realtors Association put their best foot forward. All this stuff that I'm talking about, all the stuff that I'm sure Mr. Martis will talk about, all of that was presented to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And here's what the courts found. They upheld the state's rules for wind turbines because there is no causal relationship between the siting of wind turbines and a measurable change in property values. Okay, they found in favor of the wind companies, and they stated it does not impact property values. Okay, we put this slide in here. This is the Energy and Policy Institute. They catalog outcomes of 49 attempts by wind farm opponents to use the courts and tribunals to stop developments. Okay, they went out around the world and they said, okay, all these wind projects are around the world, how many of these have ended up in court, and what is the outcome? All right, and they found 49 instances of this, and in 48 of the 49 instances, they found in favor of the wind companies, the wind projects. Okay, now the Energy and Policy Institute, they also went on they profiled 16 individuals that typically would travel around the United States as experts and testify against wind energy projects. The reason that I put Mr. McCann in here is because he is oftentimes seen around the Midwest, and you will hear people who oppose these projects, he'll say, you will lose 20 to 40% of your property value if a wind turbine is next to your house. They will throw that number out there. That is where this number came from. He is cited all the time. Now, Mr. Mike McCann is a real estate appraiser from Chicago. He's a regular in anti-wind circles, constantly attempting to push his flawed studies and statistical analysis to prove that wind farms cause property value harm. At present, he has conducted 2 small studies covering 81 property transactions compared to 10 major studies in North America and Europe covering 1.3 million property transactions. My point is, he did his own study of 81 transactions. You compare that to the 10 studies of 1.3 million transactions and actually Wisconsin Supreme Court took that into account and determined that there are no property value implications from wind projects. Okay, a couple of myths that we're going to talk about here because a lot of this stuff has been thrown around the county quite a bit lately, so we're just going to hit on some of these quickly. You need fossil fuel dispatchable energy for every megawatt of renewable energy. Okay, I'm sure that went right over the head of most of you. We're kind of getting into the weeds, we're getting technical about this. I don't want to spend much time on this because I'm limited to 30 minutes, but we will happily discuss this. Anybody wants to have this conversation with me or these 2 gentlemen, see us afterwards. But here's what I'm telling you. It is not true, all right? Utility companies, power generation companies all over the world are replacing fossil fuel energy with renewable energy, period. Another myth, if we had built more natural gas plants rather than wind farms, the reduction in CO2 on a cost basis would have been greater. You know what, that's true. It's a true statement, okay? But it's very misleading, all right? And here's why. Here's a quote from the Wall Street Journal. The EPA released new data in April showing that oil and gas industry is the nation's top emitter of methane. So while yes, if you replace coal generation with natural gas, you do reduce the carbon dioxide levels, okay? I agree with that. Everybody in this room will likely agree to that if you look into it. However, what they're not telling you is that carbon dioxide isn't the issue with natural gas, okay? You're only getting half the story there. The problem is that one of the products of natural gas is methane, and methane is 25 to 100 times worse than carbon dioxide. So while, yeah, it is true it's reducing carbon dioxide, but you're really greatly increasing methane, all right, which again is horrible for the environment. Okay, another myth. Wind energy is not a competitive energy product for Michigan, all right? That is just flat out not true. The last power purchase agreement was for $43 for a wind project in Huron County, Michigan from Consumers Energy. The 20-year power purchase agreement, which means in year 2035, they're going to be paying $43 per megawatt hour as they are paying today, 43 megawatts, for $43 per megawatt hour, okay? The Michigan Public Service Commission projected advanced coal plant levelized costs at $123 to $135. What that means is that if you build a new coal plant in Michigan, that is going to be roughly $125 a megawatt hour. That is almost 3 times more than the last power purchase agreement signed in Michigan for a wind project. All right, 3 times. That is why the CEO of DTE just came out last week and indicated that they're going to phase out all coal plants because it's just not economic. Natural gas combined cycle plants cost roughly $65 to $67 per megawatt, all right, which is roughly, what, 20 bucks more than the last wind project. And the thing about natural gas is 5 minutes, okay. I'm going to move on here, folks. So, if the project, okay, one more myth. If the project is no longer feasible, then we'll be stuck with inoperable wind turbines. Okay, understand that we will get in place a decommissioning agreement with the county. We will set funding aside in the event that Apex is no longer solvent. We understand that that's part of the site plan. We know that we have to put that money aside. So if something were to ever happen, the turbines will be taken down. Okay. Let me see if I can comment on one more thing here. Wind energy uses a lot of land, while natural gas turbines can fit in a barn. You'll probably see a slide from Mr. Martis about a natural gas turbine in a barn. But what he doesn't tell you is you got to burn something to have that that turbine work, right? The gas turbine. So my question is, do these fit in a barn? How about the hundreds of thousands of miles of pipeline to get that gas to the natural gas pipeline? All right, one more comment. All right, so really, what is this all about? Okay, wind energy facilities have not been shown to have any impact on health or property values. Sound impacts. All credible studies indicate no impact. All credible studies indicate no impact in regard to health and safety. Regarding property values, all credible studies indicate no impact. All right, so it comes down to this one question. Isn't this really just about protecting certain people's views? That's really what it comes down to. There is no real argument against wind energy unless you don't like the way they look. And I'm not here to tell anybody that you should find these things to be beautiful or majestic, okay? I think they're pretty cool, but, like art, it's in the eye of the beholder. Are they big? Absolutely, they're big. They're 500 to 600 feet tall. Nobody here is telling you that they're small. They are big. But the question is it worth to you, because you don't like looking at them, to walk away and deny $26 million to your neighbors, $26 million to 140 families, to over 300 individuals? Is it worth walking away from $12 to $15 million in tax revenue to your county that you can use for your schools and your roads and your police departments, etc.? All right? Is it worth continuing to send $20 billion out of your state every single year? All right? When you have the ability to make this, to manufacture this right in your backyard. Okay? That's really what it comes down to. We're here offering jobs, we're here offering economic opportunity, we're here offering clean energy. You have the ability to influence national policy and influence energy. You can avoid sending troops to the Middle East by doing your own generation, by creating your own wind project right in your own backyard. So I thank you very much for your time, and I really look forward to the question and answers, and talk to you soon. Thanks.
Kevin, all yours.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me well now? Yes. Super. While the presentation's coming up, I'd make a couple comments. First of all, Mr. Leela's statement that I am a lobbyist for the gas and oil industry is false. I climbed off a remodeling project today down in Lenawee County so that I could take half a day off work to be with you here today. That is a false statement. Secondly, I would point out that the quote about Mike McCann, the appraiser, is from a gentleman named Mike Barnard. Mike Barnard is an employee of IBM. He ran a website called Barnard on Wind. The statements made on that website were so inflammatory that IBM told him, remove your website or lose your job. And they have pulled that website from the web, and it's no longer there. So just a couple of quick housekeeping matters there. Okay, I will try and be quick. If you thought Brad spoke quickly, hang on to your hats. We got a lot to cover. So here's my credentials. I got a history degree from the University of Michigan. Of course, so did the Unabomber. I spent 6 years on the Riga Township Planning Commission, and I helped draft this ordinance, which was added to a state list of model wind energy zoning ordinances. Normally, I'd just be talking to you about effective land use regulation to protect you from nuisance aspects of conflicting land uses, but as you can see, Brad spent most of the time talking about generation and environmental issues, and so I'm going to have to cover some of those things quickly as well. I'm not a lawyer, but I do watch Law and Order. I'm not offering you legal counsel, and if your township is considering regulating wind energy, or your county, I recommend you hire specialized counsel. I understand what it's like if you're a county commissioner with us tonight or a trustee of being faced with this room full of people all asking you for different things, and it's probably not something you expected when you signed up for the job. The sheer mass of the devices, as Brad referred to, is something that gives us pause. In fact, if Mr. Leela was here proposing building 50 or 60, 600-foot tall billboards, I don't think it ever would have made it this far. Reasonable zoning driven by consent and compensation can transfer the responsibility of making these incredibly difficult and highly impactful land use decisions away from your elected officials and into the hands of the private landowners who can negotiate these things. Again, I have to move quickly. We have 1,500 megawatts of wind installed. We started out with a state recommendation of 1,000 feet and 55 decibel noise limits. The wind developers used to carry that from town to town like they did in my township and said this is the industry standard. What have we learned? Well, every major wind development in Michigan has produced widespread complaints, legal action, recalls, referenda across the state. It's wildly unpopular once it's established. In fact, nothing makes it harder for a wind developer to sell a project than if another developer has built one in the township next to him, because it's very difficult to convince people that you'll hardly notice they're there. Heritage project in the Garden Peninsula is typical. Only 14 turbines, 73 complaints. In Sanilac County and Tuscola County, people just turned over entire township boards to put people into office that would protect their property rights and the amenity of their home. Every time the township has had a chance to vote on permissive wind energy zoning, it has been rejected 11 times since 2009. And since 2009, more than 30 townships and 3 counties have rejected wind energy, including Mason, Emmett, and Schoolcraft. Huron County, with more turbines than the rest of the state combined, they appear to have had enough. DTE now faces a leaseholder revolt in Lincoln. All 5, actually only 4 of the 5 trustees have wind leases. But even though they have potential to have a project built on their property, they nonetheless went to Huron County and said that we have done enough for green energy. We feel no additional turbines should be allowed in Huron County. And now Huron County Commission is now considering a moratorium of 5 years against any more wind development in Huron County, despite the school revenue, despite all the money that Mr. Legal talked about. And Mr. Legal is right, I don't need to belabor it, but as you can see, looking where Shiawassee County is, it's a very poor wind resource. That's beyond dispute, and that's from the National Renewable Energy Lab, not Mike McCann, or not Wind Action or Wind Watch, but from the Renewable Energy Lab. Secondly, his point about whether or not that energy is deliverable into the state is largely irrelevant. The new energy bills in front of us would allow the utilities to simply buy the renewable energy credits. And despite the fact that we're going to build very tall turbines here if the project goes forward, you can see that the low wind resource turbines that we have to use in Michigan because we have such an anemic wind resource still remain very expensive. One of the most expensive wind energy contracts ever signed in the history of the United States was signed with the Heritage Wind Project, $106 a megawatt hour. That is not getting cheaper. We're stuck with that for 20 years. Is that this one? No. So the MPSC boasts about wind power purchase agreements getting cheaper, and they're in the mid-40s, but you can see even Apex is offering wind into Missouri at 21 at the very top there. Our cheapest contracts are triple the price of wind energy contracts in the Plain States. This is like forcing us to build hydroelectric power in the state trying to compete with Colorado. Could it be done? Yes, but there's a huge cost difference. So, all the promised revenue to your community in the form of tax payments and lease payments is recovered from residential, commercial, and industrial ratepayers and via reduction in revenue to the U.S. Treasury. Let's look at the cost side of the ledger of expensive energy. The Steel Manufacturers Association reported in 2012 they use $18 billion a year in electricity. A 10% increase in that electricity price, just 10%, would add $1.8 billion in additional cost to the steel industry. With 100,000 steel workers, that's $18,000 per employee no longer available for union wages, fringes, and benefits. Our wind contracts are 250% higher than the 2014 MISO average wholesale price for electricity. So in other words, look, he's giving us all money, just like he promised. And the wife dutifully notes, well, he has your wallet. Brad already discussed this, and he did not disagree with me. Had we spent $3.5 billion on combined cycle gas turbines, our coal emissions, mercury, fine particulates would have been slashed by half. Instead, they've only been reduced by a few percentage points. MISO did a study and said, yes, we reduce CO2 with wind, but at a very high price, $237 a ton, 7 times higher than combined cycle gas turbines. And the relative subsidies per BTU, wind gives 69 times the amount of subsidy support of coal. So, Mr. Lee, the last time we spoke, challenged my definition of a subsidy versus a tax credit. And there is a substantial difference. Let's see if you catch on to that. A $5 billion subsidy leaves $5 billion less in the U.S. Treasury to fund Head Start, veterans benefits, infrastructure, etc. That is much different than a $5 billion tax credit, which leaves $5 billion less in the U.S. Treasury to fund Head Start, veterans benefits, and infrastructure. Radical difference. What about land use? We talked about nuclear energy the last time I met with these folks. If you don't like nuclear, you can replace it with wind. You just put 2 turbines in every square mile from Toledo to Detroit to Ann Arbor, and yet you still have to build 1,100 megawatts of gas turbines. 36 square miles of turbines, like proposed maybe in your community, could be equaled by this gas generator. Mr. Lila said we could do 40% renewable in the state of Michigan. That's the land mass that would be required, and that assumes 72 turbines per township. They've never been built to that high a density. So, it's important to note, Mr. Lila left you to believe that the choice is between gas or fossil fuel. But General Electric is a member of the AWEA Board of Directors, along with Apex Clean Energy. General Electric told the Obama White House, if flexible generation assets, such as gas turbines, are not available, renewable technologies will not be deployed. In other words, gas turbines are an essential component of renewable energy sources' ability to penetrate the market. That's a board member of the American Wind Energy Association, and likely the manufacturer of the turbines proposed for your area. This is why James Hansen, a leading scientist, suggests renewables less rapidly off fossil fuels in the U.S., China, India, or the world as a whole is almost the equivalent of believing in the Easter Bunny and Tooth Fairy. So let's go quickly to the zoning issues. If we're to buy a car, if Mr. Lila was to sell you a car this morning, it'd be easier for you to evaluate because virtually everybody here, unless we have a large Amish community, owns a car. You have a long life experience with these devices. But how about a 100-meter class Vestas V100? Well, these I think are going to be 120-meter class. How tall are they? Well, 476 feet. These are the ones in Mason County, Ludington. Well, here's what they look like at 1,169 feet. This is my friend Kerry Schineldecker. He used to live in the house. He abandoned it for what apparently was imaginary impact from the low-frequency noise, and he sold it at a 30% loss, but that loss of property value apparently was also imaginary. So it's not a fair comparison with the turbines proposed here because it's 20% smaller. Here's 552 feet to the tip of the tower. Here's 494 footers in the thumb. And again. And this is in Ocotillo. The thing that we hear people talk about most of all things that people have the biggest complaints about wind turbines is the flashing red lights. They don't go away. Every night they're there. And the people, when I spoke in North Dakota and Nebraska, where they really cherish their broad views of the horizon, find this very offensive. And here's just 390 footers taken from across the field in DeKalb, Illinois, showing what the various setback distances look like. You'll find a half-mile setback does not look drastically different from a quarter mile. So, health, safety, and welfare. Brad already did some of my slides for me. My point is, if it cannot be performed in our communities in keeping with health, safety, and welfare, it must not be permitted. The developer's primary commitment is to bottom line, and their recommendations are based on return on investment. But a planning official's single commitment must be to health, safety, and welfare. So we've heard a lot about profits, we've heard about tax revenue, private property rights, green jobs or emissions reductions, but none of those things for a zoning official is more important than health, safety, and welfare. I'm going to just briefly go over a few things, but understand that the Shiawassee County wind zoning ordinance has a 1.5 times the turbine height setback to property lines and 2 times the height setback to non-participating homes. 45 to non-participating homes and a 6-foot height limit. No one has ever built 600-foot turbines in Michigan, let alone at a 1,200-foot setback. Mr. Lila talked about Huron County as a model. They cap turbine height at 500 feet, and their setbacks are now fixed at 1640. That's a 3.28 to 1 setback ratio. The Shiawassee ordinance yields only a 2 to 1 setback ratio. This is among the most permissive in the state. So, in general, you can just regulate heights. And as much as Mr. Lila talked about how you have to prove that they have to be unhealthy or unsafe, that's just not true for land use regulations. Do you regulate residential homes to 2 or 3 stories in height in your township or county? You probably do. Is that because 4 or 5-story homes are unsafe or make people sick? No. Wind turbines are no different. You may restrict their size for the sake of appearance. We regulate billboards in the same fashion to protect our view shed. That's standard land practice, land use policy practice. Detroit Edison's employee Steve Rawlings says there are some pristine places in Michigan where you don't want to impact the view shed. Curiously enough, the area he's talking about is where he lives. But in Huron County, he had no objection. So how tall is too tall? Just like any other land use, it's up to you. How are we in time?
You've got 18 minutes.
18 minutes, great. I will take a breath. 3 safety manuals I brought up. General Electric references icing, and they talk about before parking near the turbine, stop 350 meters from the turbine, check the rotor blades for ice, etc. I'll point out that Mr. Leela talked about fire and overspeed events, which are rare. Icing events are a common occurrence on turbines. It's not a rare event. It's part of their normal function. Yet here we are at over 1,000 feet away to protect their employees and looking with binoculars and so forth. Vestas talks about runaway operations, 1,640 feet. Nordex, 1,640 in the event of a fire. It's interesting. It says, if runaway operations should occur, the plant must be evacuated immediately by running upwind, and access to the surrounding area of a radius of at least 500 meters must be restricted. I've never heard a wind developer propose adding language that, if nothing else, obligates their technicians to knock on your door as they run by across your private property to get to the evacuation zone. Adjusting these recommendations for 600-foot turbines would yield something closer to 2,000 feet. Here's a 390-footer with a 1,500-foot reported debris field. Wind developers routinely demand 1,000 to 1,400 feet from neighboring homes. And you know what? When turbines go to 1,000 feet tall, they'll still tell you 1,000 to 1,400 feet is a safe distance. Why? We have a road every square mile in the Midwest. You get to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 foot setbacks, they can't build. That's how we know the recommendations are not built around health, safety, and welfare, but rather around their economics. Trespass zoning. It is a phrase that I coined along with State Senator Bill Seitz in Ohio, who's an attorney and the chair of the Public Utilities Commission, or Committee. And they have state-level siting of wind turbines, as Apex knows, and they have set their setbacks to the property line in such a way that's effectively squashed all new wind development in the state of Ohio. And it's a very valid concept. People say, well, that's just a phrase you made up. And I would say, well, so's the phrase good neighbor agreement. So what are these setbacks? Well, the developers are recommending here, actually, numbers more permissive. This setback as close as 1,320, here it's less, 1,200, even though the evacuation zone as prescribed by the manufacturer is much bigger. The green guy on the left is a no-contract farmer, the gray on the right is a contracted farmer. Even if you move it back to the house, you see that semicircle is on your unleased property, that you still have a substantial impact on your property. It becomes a safety easement. By moving these back to the property line, you've at least preserved the right to build on that property freely. And many ordinances are constructed that once that setback radius goes to your house, you can't build a new home inside that radius. So the farmer on the left, whose daughter wants to go into the farming business, may not be able to build a second home on their home parcel because of the turbine radius. Now here's an Exelon map from Bridgehampton Township showing exactly that. Gray is unleased, green is leased. Zoom in, you can see the setback circles. This fellow down here in the bottom, maybe 50% of his property is now inside the setback radius. Maybe you don't want to call that trespassing, but I don't know of any other land use regulations that measure setbacks from an interior feature of the neighboring parcel. They're always established at the property line because you pay taxes on all of it and you should enjoy the free use of that property. So, Oliver Wendell Holmes said, the right to swing my fist ends where the other man's nose begins. I say if my development project requires me to repeatedly punch you in the nose, I should first get your consent and then compensate you for your broken nose. The express goal of zoning of any type is to separate conflicting land uses. He talked about dust and manure and tractor noise. All those things are protected by the Michigan Right to Farm Act. They're not subject to local control. I don't think that we should adopt zoning that grants legal access to the nuisance activity from the neighbor's tenant's device. It's not even your neighbor's device, it's just his tenant. So, what's the right setback? Well, if you want it to protect from raw rotor failure or fire, 1640 for a 500-foot class turbine might be reasonable. If you want to do it for noise regulations, then maybe up to 1.25 miles may be reasonable. And for property value impacts, maybe 2 miles. But at that point, a height limit may be more defensible in court. And I'd encourage you to look at the Riga Township ordinance. I think it's a great model. I'm not going to go into the details. Equitable wind energy zoning should not forcibly donate unleased property to the neighboring landowner's tenants. And I'm not going to talk about this because of time. So how loud is too loud, and who do you believe? Mr. Lila talked about the World Health Organization at the last meeting, and the World Health Organization doesn't just talk about fine particulate emissions, but also noise. And they say outside average, nighttime average of 30 to 40 decibels, you start to see some people having some sleep impacts. It will affect the young, chronically ill, and elderly to a greater degree. 40 to 55, sharp increase in adverse health effects. Despite all the claims that there are no literature suggesting that wind turbines cause health impacts, here's the World Health Organization saying noise of any kind above these levels causes health impacts. It's not a main argument of mine to talk about wind turbine syndrome and health impact, but there is literature that says noise of any kind causes harm. George Hessler did a study for the state of Minnesota where he said it would be advisable to attempt to maintain a mean sound level of 40 decibels or less outside all residences. Your county here has a 45 decibel noise limit and much higher for a leased property. And even if 40 decibels would not be completely insignificant. Now, we mentioned the study in Canada. Maybe one of the reasons they're finding fewer issues is that they have lower noise limits in Canada and bigger setbacks than are proposed here. Next Era, this is from their website, also on the board of the American Wind Energy Association. They said, look, the Ontario Ministry of Environment sound guidelines for rural areas establish maximum sound levels at residents of 40 decibels, which is consistent with the standards set by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. That's not the Koch brothers. That's not just Breitbart News. This is the US EPA. We did a 40 decibel nighttime noise limit at property lines, 45 dBA daytime, and then we added low frequency noise limit protection as well. Now, you know, we could have played Ben Hone drinking bingo tonight because the odds of this report being brought up was 100%. Every wind developer in the country peddles this around. Mr. Hone said about his own study, I think one of the things that often happens is that wind developers put our report forward and say, look, property values aren't affected. And that's not what we would say specifically. That's because they didn't spend a lot of time looking at houses 1,000 to 1,400 feet from turbines in the report. On the other hand, they have little ground to stand on if they say we won't guarantee that. Mr. Lila made a compelling case that there's no risk to your property values whatsoever, then he should have no risk for his company whatsoever in offering a property value guarantee. There's three common studies that talk about no impact of property values. They're all associated with the wind or energy industry. There's a whole bunch of property value studies that show 14 to 59% loss, including the Heinzelman study, which was also used a similar methodology to the home study and found a substantial property value loss. You can also look up the London School of Economics. Again, not a right-wing anti-wind group. The London School of Economics reported 11% loss of property values. So let's wrap up. Most land use policies are pretty benign. If you got a 40 square foot advertising sign and somebody raises it to 45 square feet, some people might not like it, but it's not really a big deal. But we felt that the wind turbines are so big and their impact's so pervasive that they should have additional scrutiny, and the partners, the neighbors surrounding them, should have the ability to negotiate on their own behalf of what their loss of amenity is worth to them. Two-stage setbacks with a waiver for both noise and distance require the developer to negotiate with all impacted citizens. It's fair and equitable and reduces community division. Nobody has ever come to your county commissioners and said, the light coming through my windows is too steady, could you make it flicker? They've never said the nighttime noise level is too quiet, could you raise it to 50 decibels from 25? My property values are too stable, could you build some 50-story industrial machines next door to put that value at risk? Wind developers ask communities to adopt zoning language that essentially awards free safety and nuisance easements across non-participating properties. In other words, trespass zoning. Reasonable wind energy zoning demands that those easements be negotiated individually and privately. Imagine if there was a gas line coming across your farms and your zoning said the gas company only had to negotiate an easement with every fourth landowner. Would anybody think that's equitable?
No.
The impacted landowners should not have those things thrust upon them by zoning regulation. This we call property right zoning. The wind developer prefers your county to decide for all of you, but the two-stage zoning and set noise limits leave that decision in the hands of the private property owners. And that's the end of my presentation.
We're talking facts tonight. Brad, you've got 5 minutes to make any additional comments.
Thank you. Just quickly, I suppose. If all this were true, why is it that wind turbines keep getting erected all over the world? Why is it that in Gratiot County, you have how many wind projects, how many turbines that have gone up there with no impacts that I have ever heard of? How about Huron County? I spent 8 years working in Huron County. They have so many wind turbines up there. The Board of Commissioners, Clark Elfman from the Board of Commissioners, who was always in favor of wind turbines, at one point he said, you know what, Brad? He goes, we just got so many here that we just really don't need any more. And which they're flush with wind turbines. That is why you're seeing Huron County putting on further limits out there, because they just have enough of them. They had $12 million last year they received in tax revenue from the wind projects. They just don't need any more tax revenue. That's what you're seeing. Why is it that there's 48,000 wind turbines in the United States and they're continually built? Why is it that the Wisconsin State Supreme Court said, you know what, there is no more conversation about property values. We've heard all your reports, and we find that there is no evidence to indicate such. Mr. Martis brought up icing on turbines. He referenced a GE 1.5 megawatt machine. They don't make that machine. They haven't made it in quite a while. That's old technology. They have new technology that senses icing. The blades are flexible. This just isn't an issue anymore. That's just simply an old reference. Tax credits. I don't want to use this into the 5 minutes. I sure hope somebody during the question and answer period will ask about subsidies and tax credits, because I would love to talk about that. DT and Consumers Energy, all right, as well as XL Energy and all the other utilities in the United States, they don't need to buy renewable energy anymore. They've all met mandates, and yet they're still buying renewable energy. Why is that? The answer is because it's cheap. It's cheap and it works, okay? It's all over the United States, it's all over the world. The mandates are filled up, but yet they keep buying it, they keep buying it. World Health Organization. Very interesting that you're going to use the World Health Organization as a quote. Okay, the World Health Organization is not on the side of their cause. The World Health Organization supports renewable energy. Matter of fact, in 2016, just this year, the World Health Organization identified the #1 killer in the world is air pollution. All right, responsible for 7 million deaths. 600,000 of those deaths are children from air pollution. The #1 cause of air pollution is the burning of fossil fuels. So when you talk about decibel levels, which by the way, that was from the study of jet airplanes, not wind turbines. When you talk about decibel levels, just understand the World Health Organization is not on their side. They're on our side. I guess that's about all I've got right now. But again, look forward to some question and answers. And soon. Thanks.
Let's talk about why wind turbines get built in the state of Michigan, where they get built. 3 words: conflict of interest among the policymakers who establish the regulations to get these projects to go forward. In Huron County, the majority of the Planning Commission members in 2007 and 8 who created the regulations for wind development had wind leases and did not recuse themselves from the policy-making decisions. In Fairgrove Township, which Mr. Leela referenced, 9 out of 13 elected and appointed officials had leases with NextEra Energy. I was in the meetings. Their attorney said, oh, there's no conflict. You just go right ahead and continue. The other places where wind gets built in the state of Michigan is where there are townships without zoning subject to permissive county zoning. That's what happened in Gratiot County. The wind developers used to tell everybody in the state how everybody loves wind in Huron County until they couldn't tell that story anymore. They continue to say that in Gratiot County, but yet we know people in Gratiot County who are very much unhappy. Secondly, none of them are living with 600-foot turbines, only 600 to 1,200 feet from their homes. So there's a radical difference. Finally, the World Health Organization is absolutely on our side because they're just talking about noise. Wind turbines make noise. And the World Health Organization has said clearly, community noise causes harm to human health at inappropriate levels. He continues to talk about fossil fuel. The majority of the companies on the board of the American Wind Energy Association are in fact fossil fuel companies. If you look into the pedigree of Apex, you will find not too far down the food chain, British Petroleum. The reason fossil fuel companies are not concerned about wind development, for instance, DTE and consumers, is because in the state of Michigan, in a regulated utility environment, they get an 11%, as I recall, regulated rate of return on capital expenditures. So when they build a $1 billion wind project, they're cleaning up at ratepayers' expense, even though those wind turbines don't take away the need of the requirement of having dispatchable energy. So when DTE constructs new gas-fired power plants, the more wind they have, the less runtime they have on those gas plants, and then they have to go to the MPSC and say, look, our economics are suffering because wind is robbing our units of sale, driving up our cost per unit of energy delivered, therefore we have to ask for a rate increase. That's precisely what's happened in Europe. They have built hundreds of thousands of wind turbines. Look at Denmark, look at Germany, take a look at your utility bill and see if that's a future you want. And I guess that concludes my comment.
Pete Preston? Come on up. Come on down.
Well, I guess the first lesson of tonight is when a land use planner says a presentation is short, do not believe them. Same thing as saying a memo is going to be brief, but I will be brief tonight. One of the things that I've been asked to talk about is the process, but I do want to give a little history on this. The first introduction of a ordinance regarding wind energy was first presented to the Shiawassee County Planning Commission in 2008. Following that, in 2009, it was adopted by the county. Now, this first ordinance regulating the use and development was developed with the intent and purpose of protecting the public health, safety, and welfare. This is not atypical of a community to deal with any new use. We take it on and we present regulations and we look for public input regarding that. When a particular use does come along to be implemented, as we have here, we do have public comment. We do not have an application on file. As Mr. Leela noted, they do not have a project yet to present to us. As far as the process goes, our ordinance relies on special land use. Now, the special land use is used as a vehicle for the developer to apply to the county and then move forward with the county planning commission. A special land use application requires that a site plan and other documentation be provided to the county in order to show that it is in compliance with the ordinance. Not just the wind ordinance portion, but also other portions of the county zoning ordinance that may be applicable. A special land use is something that is permitted. It is a use that would be permitted in a particular district, but has unique characteristics that may warrant conditions. Therefore, the county has chosen the special land use process so when the site plan, when the documentation comes in, our staff determines initial compliance, but then the planning commission at a public hearing notifies everybody within 300 feet of a project area as well as advertised in the newspaper. That is the minimum requirement for notification. However, the county, upon hearing a lot of the public input, will be looking at doing additional notice for all future special land uses and site plans, not necessarily to single out wind energy as the issue of notifying additional folks. The planning commission for the county is the primary approving body. They may approve a petition, they may approve with conditions, or they may deny. The County Board of Commissioners does not approve a special land use. It lies with the Planning Commission. However, recently, the County Board of Commissioners has asked for their legal counsel to provide them input on doing, possibly implementing a moratorium. That moratorium would most likely prevent any application until issues that are outlined in the moratorium are addressed by the county. That is the next step, as I understand it, so we look forward to receiving that input and discussing with the Board of Commissioners, as well as recording a lot of the public comment that our office has received and passing that along to the County Planning Commission. And that is all I have.
Wow. Short and sweet. Sue, are you bringing me the question decks? And we'll start asking questions. Yes. Brent will be timing the answers to these questions. We'll keep them to 2 minutes on the answers. And remember, we aren't going to be able to get to all these questions. But all of the information that was presented here tonight, the presentations themselves, just lay them face down there. And I'll just mix them all up. It doesn't matter. Oh, you got them sorted by the person? So we can, okay, I'll go through the, okay. So what they've done is they've sorted the questions based on the person that needs to answer the question so that we make sure we get everybody involved. Again, the presentations that were given tonight, all the information, all of the questions, these folks will be answering the questions that aren't asked here tonight, and all that information will be set up by, I assume, the Chamber or SEDP. Somebody within those two organizations, if not both, is going to set up a web page with all that information, so that anything that we weren't able to cover tonight will be posted eventually on that. So,
Where? What is the name of that?
Jeff, you were talking about a web page. Is that going to be on the Chamber's website?
I would imagine it'll be accessed through both the Chamber and the Economic Development.
Both the Chamber, Shiawassee Regional Chamber of Commerce website and the Shiawassee Economic Development Partnership websites. They will both have the same information available. Okay, are we ready? Okay, what's the joke? Oh, well, I'm going to get started with what's here, okay? And I can't see these. I'm just picking out of the pile here. I feel like I'm some kind of contest MC. Okay, this is for Pete Preston. Can you compare the local tax incentives offered to Apex versus Cargill, WODA, or any other recent investment or development?
No, I cannot.
He says no. Is that something you can gather together and perhaps add to our information page?
The Board of Commissioners has asked us for information on potential generation of that, and so that is on our laundry list of things to look at, possible tax revenue, but as far as comparison, we haven't done that.
Okay. For those that couldn't hear him, the Board of Commissioners has, they haven't done a comparison of those kinds of numbers yet, but they've been asked to kind of pull together some of that information, and if and when that's available, they'll get it to the Chamber. Okay.
Maybe.
We'll do another pile here. This is for Kevin. If we adopt strong zoning at the county or township level, will we get sued?
If you adopt reasonable land use policy restrictions that are not arbitrary and not capricious and are not so stringent that they shock the conscience of the court, the odds of litigation is extremely low. I know of only one lawsuit since 2009 that involved a challenge to low sound limits and big setbacks. That was in Schoolcraft County. It was finally tossed from court because Heritage, the plaintiff, did not have standing. They had not yet actually applied for anything. The setbacks there were 3,900 feet from the property line, and as I recall, decibel limits as low as 35. I have a lot of these ordinances in my head, so I can't keep them all straight. Denmark Township in Tuscola County has setbacks over 3,000 feet. My township has a setback that would have effectively been a 2,400-foot setback. Mind you, I had two developers in my township at the same time, both threatening litigation if we adopted the recommendations that we came together with as a planning commission. They threatened it, said it was exclusionary zoning, you're going to lose in court, it will cost you millions. Instead, we adopted the regulations, the people put it on the ballot through the referendum process, The wind developers lost 64 to 36% at the polls, despite hiring Truscott Rossman and ASGK Strategies to sell their project to us. And when the results were counted, the developers just left. Their leases were canceled. There was no litigation. Can somebody sue? Sure. Are they likely to? Not if you adopt reasonable regulations.
Good job, under 2 minutes. You guys might as well just stay up here, because we're gonna keep going around the cards based on who the questions are being asked to. So Brad, if you want, and Pete, where'd you go? Come on back. Pete, come on back up front. You're on the hot seat here for questions. Okay, so next question is gonna go to Brad. We're just digging down in the pile. Yeah, you can bring your chairs up, that's okay, and I'll just hand you the... All right, so this is for Brad. Will you supply safety and maintenance manuals for the turbines to prove what is safe?
Never been asked that question before. I gotta believe that we will absolutely work. We've already reached out to your emergency management services here. We intend to do safety training with your EMS. We intend to walk through, and we understand it's a new technology to your area, so yeah, absolutely we're going to work with your county and make sure that you know how to respond to any type of incident with the winter.
Can you sit right there and hang on to that microphone? You guys can share that microphone and we can all share this one. You can come a little closer.
Okay, I don't want any trouble.
Oh, no, come on. We're all being good here tonight. I'm really, everybody, congratulations and thank you. This has been, when they called me and said, would you be in charge of this meeting? I went, are you kidding? This has been very informative and a very nice meeting. So thank you all. I appreciate that. Who's next up? Pete. Okay, I'm digging through the pile. Who was that? Johnny Carson, Karnak, right? I feel like Karnak. Okay, Pete, if the land is in something PA 116, how can the land be used for anything but farmland?
I'm not exactly sure if that answer is best since I've not developed a wind turbine farm. I believe Mr. Leela could probably answer that.
Hand it off.
Yes, the state recognizes that PA 116 is a use for wind turbines, for wind projects. Matter of fact, the vast majority of the farmland in Huron County, in Gratiot County, is indeed in PA 116, and the state is very accepting of it and permits it, absolutely.
Okay. This one's for Kevin. What can our townships do that do not have zoning in place?
Well, if I'm hearing things correctly from Mr. Preston, it sounds like your county is paying close attention to your concerns. So I would first say continue to report your concerns to them in a respectful manner. I would also recommend that you take a card from the Wind Developers Playbook. Try and meet with your elected and appointed officials privately over coffee instead of attacking them in a public meeting, because you're far more likely to get what you want by sitting down and have a polite, civil discussion. But secondly, if the county decides they're not going to add any additional regulatory burdens, your townships do have the option of taking back control of their zoning. The citizens can force that through an initiative process under the Zoning Enabling Act. Requires only 8% of the people that voted in the last gubernatorial election to place that matter in front of the people of the township for a vote. You can just simply ask your township to adopt local control of zoning. And people are sometimes afraid of that because they say, well, you're going to regulate everything under the sun. Guess what? You could adopt zoning that look very much like your existing zoning and just add additional regulations for wind development. All those options are available to you. So those would be my preferred solutions, but I would hope that your county would simply listen and not place this burden upon each of the unzoned townships to sort it out on their own.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Brad here. Would Apex be willing to enter into a property value guarantee agreement with landowners within 1 mile of a turbine?
The short answer is no, we cannot. And the issue that comes up here is who do we enter into those agreements with? Do we enter into it with the local government office? Are you asking for additional government regulation in this regard? And secondly, show me in any other industry that offers property value guarantees. It's just not within the standards of business in the United States.
It's not true that other industries are not compelled to offer property value guarantees. Landfills do so, other entities do so. It is not an uncommon or unheard of practice. And secondly, they have been put in effect. In Illinois, NextEra, as I recall, has been bound by a property value guarantee. So it does happen and it is feasible. On the other hand, I think if you effectively regulate the turbines in a way that gives everybody the ability to negotiate their own value for the amenity of home, the need for property value guarantee is obviated. On the other hand, there would be no risk to Apex, according to their own studies, to so offer one.
Okay, moving on. This is for Pete. Why did we not get to vote on these turbines like other counties?
The standard process under the county zoning ordinance, under the state enabling legislation, allows your representatives of the county as a legislative body to adopt regulations. Those regulations are publicly noticed and available for review and public comment to address those with the folks that goes through the legislative process and adopts them. We do not have any application. There's nothing to vote on, but in a typical democratic system, folks are elected or appointed by those elected officials in order to foster through projects or to develop regulations. And if I could address the previous question, I didn't catch all of it concerning the Cargill. I misunderstood the question as what revenue is generated from the wind turbines. I think the question had more to do with abatements. I do not believe that the county, or I have not been involved in any conversation regarding abatements for a particular wind farm or anything coming in of that nature. But that's a question that can also be provided to the county board of commissioners.
When we talk the language that we're talking about here, when somebody asks about tax incentives, typically that means that the business gets a tax abatement for a period of years, that they don't have to pay a certain amount of tax, correct? Okay, and Brad says he would like to also make another comment on that.
Just a quick comment in that regard. We never asked for a tax abatement. Okay, most industries that come into your community will ask for a tax abatement. We're looking at a $250 million project coming here, and we never did ask that. We are required to pay an industrial